Hello, hello, hello. It's Juanita Liggins. Just still going over, not just still, but going over another Bible study. Today we'll be in David, King David, or the child David, however you want to think about him. David had a very beautiful life, but you can't start talking about David without, you can't start talking about David or the child David without talking about what happened prior to David's life. So in First Samuel, I just want to read you from my study Bible, and of course we're still doing the SOAP method, which is scripture, observation, application. Because applying it is the most important part for me. So scripture, observation, application, and then prayer. And sometimes, every time, I think it's important that when you pray for what you feel like what the scripture is reaching out to you. I will be doing it a little differently. I realize I think I have been putting too much passage, and I think I have. I know I've been trying to do too much passage. So what I'm doing now is breaking it up as I read, and as even as I focus in on just David, and we're just focusing in. Our focus scripture is the David and Goliath story. So our focus scripture is the David and Goliath story, but I still want you to have some background knowledge. And I'm going to read the background knowledge, not from my own understanding, from my study Bible. So I'm going to read that now. So, sorry, I have a lot of background for what's going on today. So it starts off what leadership requires. Israel fighting for survival, needing a leader. That's how it starts off. And so it even pinpoints the scripture here, even though this is First Samuel, it goes into Samuel 2 9 and 10. For not by might does one prevail, the Lord, his adversaries shall be shattered. So I think about the song, not by power, not by might, but his spirit, Lord, his spirit. Anyway, so no country, no organization, and this is not scripture. This is going into study Bible. So no country, no organization, no family is great without great leadership. But how do you get it? Israel was forced to ask that question during a critical do or die period. That's when you get real stuff going, do or die. Three men rose to highest power: Samuel, Saul, and David. So we got Samuel, Saul, and David. All were attractive, powerful figures who commanded admiration and respect. Two, David and Samuel made very successful leaders. Another promising beginning but ended as failure. And then we have going to fighting for survival. Israel was fighting for survival. The Philistines had migrated to a region without the same time Israel had escaped from Egypt. Now, from their cities for Mediterranean coast, they were gradually pushing deeper into the mountains of Israel. They had superior weapons, chariots, in in particular, though less populous or less populated than Israel, they were apparently better organized. Does it make a difference when things are more organized? Israel had neither critical, sorry, Israel, I'm reading from this study Bible again, sorry. Israel had neither central administration nor regular army. A loose confederation of 12 tribes charged the military defense when necessary. The nation had worked that way for well over 100 years, and the tribes seemed to be independent to change. A tribe seemed too independent to change, so no change was, they didn't want to change basically. But the Philistines were pressing them, a crisis of leadership, a crisis testing a very extensive, sorry, throat, a crisis testing a very extensive of Israel was building. So basically, something's coming up, and what are we going to do? And this is the part I actually wanted us to focus on here. Why begin with Hannah? So that is why this is actually why I want to kind of start with. Surprisingly, Samuel 1 opens up not with battle or even leadership or crisis, but with a very private family problem. Two bitterly jealous wives had a long standing quarrel, one taunting the other because of her her infertility. Hannah, the childless woman, turned to God in desperation, praying, promising to dedicate her son to God. The result was a little boy named Samuel. Hannah kept her vow to God, and Samuel grew to be one of the greatest leaders Israel had ever known. He had a triple role. He served the prophet, who could discern God's will, as priest, who led known who Israel to worship, and as his military leader. So he was a priest, a military leader, and he was someone that could discern um, discern dreams and discern that we've been talking about later um, earlier scriptures. I'm telling you, it's falling downstairs. Uh, but as we've been talking about those people who can discern the visions of God, and they were very needed during these times. So this is Samuel. So this is going back even before those scriptures that we were talking about. But this is just something. This is a start of it. Like I can see like how the Bible is still just it's a puzzle piece of things. And if you're not studying it, I can see how people can get so confused. And anyway, let me keep going. Again, I'm going to just kind of start over with that. So Hannah kept her vow to God, and Samuel grew to be one of the greatest leaders that Israel had ever known. He had a triple role. He served the prophet who could discern God's will, and the priest who led the Israel to worship, and the military leader. He chose under God's direction Israel first two kings. Samuel was the strongest personality undergrads in the entire book of Samuel. Even though he officially retired at the end of chapter 15, why begin Samuel with Hannah? Hannah's struggles of Israel is so miniature. Her frustration forced her, her frustration forced to look to God. As a result, her son Samuel served in the tabernacle instead of following in his father's footsteps. Because if she just had this child under normal circumstances, she would never have got thought to think of putting him in connection with God. But she was desperate. It's funny how desperation and calling out to God in that combination, it makes a difference in how we do things. The Israelites who were going to experience great and many troubles for their history needed Hannah's example. So it's that example through her life that she's living, and her desperation, and her seeking God's face, and her promising God what she was going to do for her with her son, because she could have just promised these things and never fulfilled it. Imagine if she was that type of mother who said, "Oh, I did this, but I want to just spend time with my son," which would still had I would have understood that. But no, Hannah promised God. She asked first. She requested. She humbly, from her heart, requested. That makes a difference. Not just God, I want a new car. She humbly knew it was something that she was needing and something she could fulfill, and she asked God for it. She humbly asked God for it. She requested. She didn't demand. She requested. Then she made a promise, and then she fulfilled the promise that she had for God or asked God for. And I like how it opens up with that. Let me keep reading. God chooses his own leaders. People think that they are able to put this person to that person. Even now, with our political things that we're going through, we're voting. We're America, whatever. We thinking we're putting somebody in position. God will still use whoever is going to be in this position for political power, whoever it might be. It's nobody that's so strong or so crazy or whatever that they can't be used by God. We saw that with King Nebuchadnezzar. It's nobody that he can't put down or put towards his will. Um, King Nebuchadnezzar was doing some crazy stuff. Anyway, but I believe it's nobody that he can't use. And we know who we want to be in position, and that's who we are hoping for. But in everything, I look in this is one reason I believe God has me studying everything. It's nothing that God can't use. It's nothing that God can't do. I'm gonna wrap this up in this part here. God chooses His own leaders. Hannah's story so reminds us that God's leaders don't necessarily come through regulation channels. Ordinarily, Eli's corrupt sons who would have carried on the nation's leadership. But God wanted no part of them. Instead, He blessed a woman who turned to Him in her times of troubles. He blessed her son as so long as the son trusted Him for help. God chose a leader to suit Him, a leader who listened to Him. The Lord declares, "Those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me, I shall be treated with contempt." He didn't say He's going to despise them. He loves all His children. Don't ever forget. I don't care if it's the pedophile, the rapist, the murderer. No matter how lowly or disgusting we may think somebody is, God still loves them. And if He wants to use them, He will. And that is 2 and 30. Samuel never forgot that lesson. He anointed Saul, and he was as the first king. And then Saul failed to honor God, stripped of his authority, passing over many impressive men. Samuel chose David, a young shepherd, to replace Saul. Under David, Israel would be transformed into a wealthy, secure kingdom. Was that because David was such a natural leadership qualities? First Samuel suggests a different perspective. David succeeded because God chose him for the job, and because David persistently turned to God in his direction. The best leadership ultimately belongs to God. So that's just how I wanted to start off with this, and making sure we know, like, this is the primary parts of this is First Samuel 1 and 2 that they're kind of summing into and getting into with the study Bible. And if you want to read it, even my study Bible even suggests different ways to read First and Second Samuel or First Samuel. It says like to look at it as a 2-week course in the Bible. Track the program is track the process of looking at it, from just breaking it up from day one, introducing Samuel to introducing Samuel. In chapter 3 is when Samuel was getting his calling. Day 2, read chapter 16, how God chose David and why. Chapter 17, the exciting story of David's victory over Goliath, and that's how we're going to take it from there, because that's where I want to bring some more things into. So chapter 17 is where we'll be coming in primarily, and I'll highlight scriptures and let you know where we're coming from there. And then chapter 20 is a glimpse of model friendship between David and Jonathan. I will be coming from a little bit of there too, because it's something about just that friendship I think is so unique and so special. And I have a few female friends that I feel like can kind of step into that role of like thinking about them as David and Jonathan. And before I go on with David and Jonathan, some people have a different mindset with them. I want you to think it's a very innocent way with David and Jonathan, because people think of getting perverse or whatever. They have a very innocent and sweet, sincere friendship. People just don't have friendships like that, so we don't understand in our time right now how wonderful it is just to have a friend, an innocent person, because those that are pure in heart can think pure in heart. So it's hard for some people to think, oh, these are just two men who have a dedicated friendship towards each other. It's a beautiful thing to see men empowering one another. It's a beautiful thing to see sisterhood and see sisters empower one another. And when you can see a sister just cheering you on and loving you and getting you through storms, that is what you want. That is what you need in life. So I hope that when we break those down into later on, that you can think about that in that way too. As for me, I had to go back and reread that several times and reread several things, and bring different bring different theologies in and see about different wordings and how this was meant and how it was taken, because of course our word has been written and rewritten, and sometimes it takes some theology and historical background and things to kind of discern what those meanings are. So anyway, just wanted to make sure we're kind of looking at that in that way. That's just for me. That's my personal thing that I had to look at differently. Some things we just look at differently. All right, so that's First and Second Samuel. Wrapping that up, and not wrapping that up, but just kind of summing that up into something that makes things a little bit better for me to understand. All right, and